Welcome back to Cosmic Conversations, your source for expansive discussion and timeless wisdom designed to help you navigate the wildly spiritual and deeply cosmic experience of being a human being on planet Earth. I'm your host, Julia Phoenix, and today my guest is the wonderful Erin Gallagher. She is a psychic intuitive coach, and I'm really excited to dive in with her to understand more about her work and also the Akashic Records and how we can utilize and get into relationship with the Akashic Records to make peace with our path on many levels. So, welcome, Erin.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. So, I would love to just spend a moment, if you wouldn't mind, sharing a little bit about yourself and what got you. Like, I always love hearing about people's path,
Yeah,
because it's
origin
always,
story.
yeah, and it's always so different, and it's always like how they aligned with the purpose work they're doing. I think that's really valuable for people to hear. So maybe you can just give me kind of the nutshell version of that, because I know it's probably long.
Yeah, there's
um
always like millions. It's funny because I always laugh with people if you ask me like, "How are you today?" I'm like, "Well, I was born in 1980," and like the
yeah,
whole yeah.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I primarily work with the Akashic Records, and I got into that. I always tell people that your Akashic Records or your Akashic guides, you don't find them; they find you, and they pull you toward them.
Hmm.
And so my kind of journey started with growing up in a very chaotic alcoholic household and
Hmm.
then numbing and numbing and numbing all my sensitivities. And for many years, I thought it was, oh, I just numb because childhood trauma. And then I realized, oh, I numb because I was very, 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 very sensitive and very, very
Right.
psychic and empathic. And first it's like the survival methods of like freezing and all of that, and then it turns into, for me it turned into drugs and alcohol. So I got really kind of mixed up in the drug world and all of that numbing. I always say I wasn't addicted to the drugs and alcohol, I was addicted to the numbing, and the drugs and alcohol were my numbing agent of choice.
Hmm.
And after years, 17 years actually, of going down that path, I in 2014, I got a DUI, and then 7 months later, it took me a long time because I was in very deep denial. It took me a long time of alcohol classes and the same teacher telling me over and over again, you have a problem, you have a problem, you have a problem. And
Mm.
I was like, I knew I had a problem, but I had so much denial. I was like, I know I have a problem, but I'm going to manage it this way, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And so after a long time of him saying, challenging me over and over again, I finally said, fine, I'll quit drinking for 2 weeks and I'll show you that it'll be fine. Right. And then I quit and had a huge spiritual awakening like within those 2 weeks. And I haven't drank ever since. So it's been almost 10 years, 10 years this in
Wow.
a few weeks, actually.
Amazing.
And in doing that, had a huge spiritual awakening, started hearing and feeling spirits everywhere all around me, not knowing what it meant. I knew I was like, had because I had done like tarot and stuff from a young age. So I knew I was connected in a certain way, but I had numbed for so long. I had like this veil over me. And so and then all of these crazy incidents started happening. I'd go to a party and be drinking tons of coffee because I was like, so not drinking, right?
Yeah.
And like all the lights would go off in the house or lights would flicker and I would hear spirits. So everywhere I go, it was like I was activating everything around me and it was activating me back. I went to one specific party and I lived and worked in LA, and I'm obsessed with Kurt Cobain. He's like my soul partner. I talk and hang out with him all the time, but his biological sister was at this party, and we started talking and the lights started flashing and all the lights went off. And so we were like in this house and it just felt very activated. And I was like, what's happening with me? So that was kind of my trip into something's going on here. And so I started going to tarot readers and all these people to figure out what was going on. And the first few years of the stopping the addiction was like anxiety, and it was really hard. And I had people,
Mhm.
you should get on anti-anxiety or antidepressant. And I just knew that's not the way. I'm not supposed to, I know I'm not meant to do that. I meant to
Mhm.
feel everything in the way that because I have hidden from the pain and all the things for so long. And so in doing the different spiritual work and the tarot, I ran into Akashic Records, or the Akashic guides called me, right? took a
Mhm.
workshop, and in that workshop, as soon as I opened my Akashic records, my guides were like, everyone was there, like, yay, you're finally here. It was like a party. All the dead people I knew that had passed away in my life, and all these other people were there. It was like, and all these guides were there, like, you finally made it after however many decades or lifetimes, you know.
Wow.
And so that was kind of the start of the journey. And I was already coaching and doing like psychic intuitive work for others. Uh, through the process of healing myself holistically from the addiction, and then started getting really more into just doing the Akashic work. Yeah, so
Beautiful. Wow, I love it. And, obviously some similarities too in our stories because for me, getting sober and getting clean was like the foundational thing. And, that was what was needed in order to open all these doors and create this foundation for those gifts to really come forward. And I loved what you said about, you know, numbing also being connected to the overwhelm of those gifts and not knowing how to utilize them and to field the information and kind of, I mean, because most of us aren't given any kind of skill sets for that. Um, so what a beautiful journey of kind of you.
especially when we're really young too, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
when you're really, really young, you don't know. And I was in the late 80s, and your parent they weren't as
Right.
tuned in, so we didn't know about any of that stuff. So it was just like I just knew that I was overwhelmed and stressed out and filled with anxiety all the time, and
Mhm.
didn't know how to deal with it, and so you learn along the way how to learn how to deal with it. And yeah, so it's been an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can't really learn how to do those things if you're not sober, like if you genuinely have a problem, and that's really where it was for me. It was like, all right, we got to deal with this first because you can't, you can't deal with a lot of other of the things that are going on until that. Um, Wow. Okay. So for those who don't know, who maybe have heard the word, the term Akashic Records, but they're not really sure what that means, how would you describe or define what the Akashic Records are?
So I think of it as like we're all physical beings. We're all made out of energy, right? We know that.
Hmm.
So we have these energy bodies, or our bodies are physical matter, but they're all with energetic DNA. And when we say or do or feel something, it has an energetic action, right? It goes out into the world
Right.
as energy.
Right.
So scientifically speaking, this energy has to go somewhere. They say every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Hmm.
And so I think of the Akashic records as like a large energy field that surrounds us at all times. Some people say that it's like only around the planet Earth. To me, the Akasha is everywhere, right? It's like the primary
Mm.
substance. Akasha means the primary substance from which all else, you know, originates.
Mm.
And so it can be very vast because every thought or feeling or experience that you've ever had in this lifetime, and all other experiences you've had, whether human, angelic, or otherwise, are recorded in this energy field.
Hmm.
And that's why they call it the Akashic
Hmm.
Records, because it's sort of like when people are leading people into the Akashic Records, they sometimes say it's like a master library where there's like tons of books, or where you can kind of
Hmm.
go in, find your soul's book and open it and look into all of your purposes in all of your lifetimes, including this one, and how it ripples forward or back. And so you can kind of also, another cool thing is, since everything has an energy vibration, you can technically open the records of anything. So if you wanted to open the records of
Mm.
planet Earth or Mount Shasta or that tree over there, you can, because
Or
everything
my
has
cell
that,
phone.
a pulse.
Yeah, I love that. That's
Yeah.
so powerful, and I don't know that I've ever heard anyone describe it quite that way. So thank you, and I love that you mentioned the DNA actually, because as you know, I work with the DNA directly, and I've come to understand and recognize that there's a big link actually between the Akashic records and the DNA, because essentially, like, we carry those experiences in our DNA, in our non-physical DNA, and we carry also specific specific experiences and the gifts and abilities that they hold that are of highest benefit to our soul purpose and mission. They're literally coded into our DNA in this embodiment. And so there's a lot of overlap there, I feel like, in the work that I do and in the work that you do, because we're both really helping people to reconnect with, um, and to really unlock and open and activate some of these gifts and abilities and capacities that are so much a part of them and are so relevant to their journey and mission here, but that they may not actually be aware of or have conscious connection to. So, how do you like to work in the Akashic Records with people?
Well, it's interesting when you're talking about that because I think of the Akashic Records almost as like the container. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything, like the DNA work, all that stuff happens kind of within it. And the Akasha is kind of like this undulating energy around and through everything. Because as we know, human beings, we're so 3D, we tend to see things as like, I'm here, we're all here, we're like
Right.
individual with our egos,
For
but we're
sure.
also together. And kind of the spirit world is just this undulating large
Yeah.
space where we're all connected, but still able to do our own things. But no one's like above anyone. There's no hierarchy, it's gotta and so it's interesting you say that. But yeah, so how I work with people, it's interesting because it's sort of I kind of have to move through the 5D and plus 5D, 60, 70, all the like dimensional spaces of the Akashic records and still be so tuned into my human self where when I'm working with people, I'm finding them or connecting with them through like human means, but then doing the Akashic. So having to hybrid those two together.
I can
Um,
relate to that piece also.
yeah. So it's like, because when you ask that, the first thing I thought is I kind of just sit back and I act as a channel for Akasha or God or whatever. And then people find me or I find them. And
Right.
so that's part of it. But another part of it is being an actual business owner and doing like the business things and reaching out and promo and stuff, promoting and marketing.
Yeah.
But when I work with people, it really depends. I am like being the kind of channel that I am. I kind of listen to their guides and my guides to tell me where to go with this person. So and being like a generator in human design, I kind of sit back and just generate whatever energy is coming from me at the time. And I know you'd posted about this yesterday, how you tend to have like groups of people you're working with that have the same issues at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of just let, the Akasha or Akashic guides work through me, find people, and then will rely on them to kind of tell me how to work with this person. Cause I have found that when I try to come in with my like, oh, this is how I'm going to work with you, or this is how we're going to work together, that's kind of like
Oh,
my ego trying to
100%.
control everything. Right.
Yeah, I've found that it is much better for everyone and better for my business and just better overall when we're really tuning into what is in the highest interest and really surrendering to that and just like moving where you're led, so that can mean saying no to a specific person. It can mean, creating something totally unique for them
Yes.
sometimes. That like having a rigid approach, I think, isn't that it doesn't make that much sense when you're doing this kind of like soul work with people. That's been my experience. And in order for it to be really clean and a really valuable experience for everyone, it just makes sense to not follow the egoic direction of things, or do it in a mental way, but really always connecting to what's of highest service for the client and for the all. So I love that
Yeah.
you mentioned that.
Yeah. And also how you're like, and this too, creating like containers or programs and cultivating whatever you feel called to cultivate. Like, this is the container. This is what's going on right now. This is what's coming up for
Yeah,
me. I know based on all of the things I'm hearing and seeing that this is it. And then letting the right people kind of fill that container, right? So
totally.
whatever program. So I, the thing that I've been doing recently is like a very clean kind of ladder. So I'll do like this
Mm.
masterclass where I support people in understand, and this is kind of like the free masterclass where it's like how to unlock your psychic gifts. So if people are just kind of flirting with like, I kind of help. I find myself falling into groups where I'm helping like beginners that are like just getting like how this is coming to me and I'm
Mm.
not sure how or why. And so I'll do the unlock and then it turns into activate your psychic gifts and then embody. So it's like
Hmm.
unlock is the masterclass, activate is a 6-week program, and embody is a 12-week program. So it's like I help people to slowly walk through and develop, and as they, because I want to kind of hold hands with people as they, how it's make your mess your message. Like a lot of times when we do stuff, it's what did I need when I was there?
Mm,
Like when I first stopped drinking and had this huge explosion, what did I need? And so I'm always going back to that self. Like, what did I need?
mm.
How could I have spoken to myself in a way that where I went, please, I need that so bad. Um, and so that's another way that I kind of tune into my guidance and where to go and what to create.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And is there like a, I mean, I feel like from what I understand and speaking with you prior, it feels like there's not necessarily like a cookie cutter way that these kinds of sessions go. Like speaking of like just the Akashic Records readings specifically, but is there kind of like a way that it tends to flow? Is there like a template that you follow?
Yeah. So I'll, like I said, create the containers and then the people kind of go to those. And then based on what container it is, that's what the information, how it comes through. And
Mm,
so, for example, I have like a mini reading for people that are just kind of like tapping in. And that in that specific container, I will tell people like, give me either one specific question or one topic of area, like, oh, relationship or money or whatever it is. Or I'll just say, or just have me do a general read. I really like the general stuff because then I'm just like, I'm opening up their records and I'm just saying, tell me what, show me something. And it's
right.
really interesting because if I don't know the person at all, in the beginning, it was like, I'm getting all of this very specific information. And when you're in the beginning, you're like, I don't know this person at all. So is this any of this right? I don't know what's happening. Right. And now I'm at the
Mhm.
point where I'm just like reading their whole life without knowing them at all. And I'm like, and because I've done it for so long, I'm like, oh, I know this is going to be perfect for them.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and
it's
you
just,
just
isn't it
trust
so
it.
weird to get information like about someone or psychic information and be like, I don't know this person at all,
Oh,
but I know.
yeah. Well, and there's these spots that I feel like you come up against, and there are these sort of sometimes it can feel like an ethical dilemma. There are areas where it's like, I'm getting this piece of information and it's coming through really strongly, but also I don't know how they're going to react to that information and it's really sensitive.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And I've learned the hard way from just saying things that I'm seeing and feeling because I'm the type of person that I'm like, let me have it. I want to hear everything, right?
Right,
And
right.
I've had a few people that most of the people that kind of either freak out or say something, it's not because it's like it's mostly because either mostly it's because they're coming in with this is what I want to hear and this is what I know I'm going to hear. When
Right.
they come in, a lot of times they'll come in like that and I will go down a totally different road and they'll be like, what's going on? Like, and also, as you know, with like trigger-ish subjects, religion and stuff like that. Like I had a woman I was talking to where I just kept hearing her guide say her next step and the thing that will open everything for her is to heal her relationship with God, heal your relationship with God. And I kept hearing that over and over again.
Mm,
To me, I would just be like, okay, what does that mean? Tell me how I can do that. What I didn't realize is that she had had a lot of religious trauma.
right.
And when I
Exactly.
said that, she was like, how can I forgive? Because her parents, like, she was going to marry a woman and her parents, like, wanted to disown her and stuff. She was like, I can't
Mm,
forgive a God that would have my parents do that. And it was like this big blow up. And I freaked out because it was in the beginning of my time doing it. And
mm,
so I have learned not only how to kind of like, well, the biggest thing with that for me was creating rules and requirements with my guides around who I work with and who I won't.
mm,
And so I have learned like how to connect with my Akashic guides and say, I, this is the type of people that I want to work with. I want people that are open and ready. And if they hear something that's like, ooh, are like, okay, I can work through them with this. And that's always, it's
right.
it's little details. It takes time to do that and figure it out as you go. And sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's valuable to talk about too, because I think it's something that it's just important and it's a part of the journey for those of us who do, you know, work in a similar vein where we're offering psychic information at any level. Like there is such a profound need for discernment and I believe also some caution with what's shared and considering context, considering the human being and their nervous system, obviously setting intentions and making sure that anything that comes through is really what's meant to, setting those boundaries of who you're working with and how you're working with them. And it is something that you sort of figure out as you go, I think. So I love that you spoke to that, that, we run up against these circumstances sometimes and it's like, okay, like what was the lesson there? And we got to maybe shift something. Um,
Yeah. And like you were saying, yeah, I mean, so this is as I was doing the Akashic work and as I started, and I was doing my business started as a tarot business. It was just like tarot and oracle card readings. And then I
mm,
started to bring in I went to this big conference, coaching conference. I was like, I was meant to be you know how it changes every how, like, oh, I'm doing this now. I'm doing this. But I was like, I'm going to be an addiction specialist because that was my background. I'm like, I'm going to help people with
mm,
addiction. That's what it's about. And then it became like Reiki master and healing. So it changed over time. But as I got more and more into the Akashic work, and doing these ethical and seeing like and testing and seeing what was right or wrong or felt right or wrong to others and consent and all that stuff, I started realizing I need to do more trauma training. And
mm-hmm,
I believe that every person that works with anyone socially, I don't, if you're a tarot card reader, a social worker, a cop, a teacher, you need to be trauma trained. Like,
mm-hmm,
I do believe that it really helps to have that background of like, if you're working socially with human beings, having some kind of trauma training is really important to understand, because especially in spiritual activation work or spiritual work, I think sometimes with like, and I don't want to talk down about like Instagram or TikTok generation or whatever, but sometimes it becomes like, oh, here's your 3 cards for the week or something. And we forget about like, oh, there may be some imposter syndrome or some tough stuff that comes up when we're doing this psychic, like deep psychic work, especially with Akashic. It's because it goes super deep.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I became trained and certified in understanding that at a deeper level so that I could hold safe space and also kind of titrate, safety. And then like, oh, I'm going to bring this up and, ooh, I can feel them starting to go here. So we're going to go back to safety, um, and how to create that space. And like you said, sort of like set it up beforehand. Like this is how the reading looks. This is what's going to come up. This may or may not come up. Um,
Right,
and knowing as a person, as you gain more and more knowledge about how to read people's energy before
right.
the
That's super
reading, you may get
important.
a thing like, oh, I may need to send a PDF to this person about like, because they might be stuck on a certain wanting to hear a certain thing because based on the energy that you know about them and stuff. So yeah, it's just testing.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of like the element of trauma, I know you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording today, about how, well, there's two pieces here that I wanted to explore, in terms of the overlap sort of between trauma and spiritual gifts, right? And psychic development. So one of these things I wanted to ask you about is that I know that you do essentially some, I don't know if you would call it embodiment work, trauma healing work, nervous system regulation work, but inside of containers that are specifically for psychic development. Can you explain a little bit to me about kind of how that works and why the two would be linked like that
Yeah, I really love that
from your
question. And
perspective?
it's something I really do feel like it's a kind of a niche subject in between that no one really talks about. Cause it's like, we'll talk all about like the spiritual aspect in Akashic, then we'll talk about all about like the trauma aspect and inner child
Right,
healing or
like it's
whatever.
separate.
Yeah, but we don't really talk about how they work together. And so I know, so one of the biggest concepts I teach, because a lot of people that come to me, they're like, I try to tap in, but every time I do, I get insane amounts of fear and anxiety.
Hmm.
And so in the beginning, I would work with them with like regulating, looking at that like trauma, anxiety, and fear as separate. And then I started realizing from doing like more work in the Akashic Records and more work with myself and others that the fear and anxiety is part of your intuition. Like it is the intuition. It's
Mm,
just that the intuition is a little cloudy and rocky and foggy because of our human experience.
mm-hmm,
And so when we're first coming to the surface and trying to learn all these things, there's our spiritual self that's like, oh, I'm a priestess. I know this, I know that. And then there's the human side going, what the, like, what is going
mm,
on, and the fear and any programming or conditioning you had from childhood or religion or whatever else there was, right? Or
mm-hmm,
somebody not believing you. Maybe you grew up with a parent that didn't believe you or said, you're not hurt, get up or whatever, that then you start not believing yourself. So when intuition work starts to come up, it's like, why should I believe this? Or I don't know. And then that fear or that internalized voice of the external thing that said you're not good enough or you don't know starts to come in.
Yeah.
So what I teach in the beginning is like, take that anxiety and that fear, know that it's coming to the surface and it's part of your intuition in order for you to then process it, look at it, observe it, love it. And that's why I do the group program, so that we can all, so you can be witnessed and say it
Mm.
and say, oh, this is coming up. As soon as you say it, you're still shaking, but it's like, it's coming out. You have other people holding space for it. And
Hmm.
then as that stuff comes up and it is processed, then the intuition becomes stronger and stronger because it's showing us the things that we are ready to release or look at. And then we kind of move the sift aside, and then the intuition gets stronger and stronger. So people will be like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm trying to access my intuition, but this pesky other stuff. I'm like, no, that means you're accessing your intuition. It is
Mm.
the stuff. So let it
Yeah.
come up, because then as you observe it and process through it, you'll get more and more sharper, intuitive. Because I think a lot of times people want to like instantly go to like, I'm like getting psychic information,
Yeah.
or I'm like hearing somebody's voice tell me like, you're a priestess of whatever. And so it's like, it's actually more human than that. I always tell people the miracles are in the mundane. So the things that we think are tiny little things that don't mean anything are actually the huge intuitive hits. And when we start,
Mm.
that's what I feel like is great about the Akashic Records. It helps us start seeing that like, actually the magic's all around us. It's in the grocery store. It's in the apple you pick up. It's like in random things that you don't think about.
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to help people look at, is those subtle things are actually part of intuition, not separate from.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. And I love that your programs really integrate that. And I'll just share that, like, for me, it's been a process where it's very much sort of in tandem, and a lot more of my psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, spiritual abilities, etc. And my DNA actually has like activated more as I have like integrated trauma and moved through trauma and come more into my body. And I think a lot of people try to kind of go about it the opposite direction, and it hasn't ever worked that way for me. And then also, of course, the more that I do, um, I guess, like different multidimensional work and DNA activation work, there's also layers of trauma that come up and that are released. So to me, the relationship is quite clear. I mean, we're a soul in a human body, but we're in a human body for a reason, and those reasons and the reasons, honestly, in my perspective and opinion, for what we are moving through also are also soul reasons, right? It's also connected to our purpose and all of these things. And so I wanted to ask you about as well, like, how could the Akashic Records potentially, and working with the Akashic Records potentially, help us to find a greater sense of peace with some of these things that have happened to us,
Yeah.
and kind of heal and move forward in a different way.
Yeah, I think the greatest thing for me about the Akashic Records is the way it is multidimensional and shows you different perspectives and dimensions within, because our human self, we're so 3D, right? And we're so absolute.
Yeah,
And because of the stories we've told ourselves for so long, it's like, well, this is what happened and this is why. And it's like,
right.
that's it. And so with the records, it helps you blow all that apart, which
Wow.
is why sometimes it can be like, oh, it can feel, and you're right. It's like you're going into the body and that's where everything is.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about with trauma stuff. If there's trauma and all that stuff lodged in the physical body, then that's why the fear and stuff, because it's coming up in order to
Hmm.
be released so that you can go deeper and everything. And so that's why, and as you know, that's why it happens in layers. So, because if we were to know and see and feel everything all at once, we'd implode, right?
Yeah, too much.
And so that's what I love about the Akashic Records, is that I feel, and what I have seen is that, and sometimes it maybe shows us or tells us a little too much, or maybe we feel like we're not ready. We are, but it just takes
Mm.
time to absorb it sometimes for our like physical
Hmm.
human self to be like, because we may not on a cognitive level, like let's say we get an Akashic reading and someone's telling us all this like way out there spiritual stuff that we're like, I don't know. On a cognitive level, you might not understand it, but there's all sorts of parts of us
Yeah, it's still
activating.
going in. Yeah. On
Yeah,
some
it's all
level.
parts of us like activating and understanding and dormant gifts that are underneath. It's like, whoa. So I always tell people, even if you're in a session with me and even if we sit there and stare at each other the whole hour and don't say anything, the amount of activation, spiritual activation that you're receiving just by me opening and being in the container of your Akashic records is astounding. Even if you don't feel it,
Hmm.
because let's say you're very like 3D in in your human experience.
Yeah.
Um, but what I've seen is that because the Akashic records are so vast, and everyone sees them differently. Some people see a big library, some people see a cathedral, some people just see colors or feel things in their physical body, some people see like an actual scroll with stuff written on it. Sometimes people don't see anything and just see kind of blackness and start to hear and feel little weird like sounds. Yeah, it's just like you never know what's going to happen.
Mm.
But I see it as sort of like a big maze with hallways and doors, where
Mm.
certain hallways and doors I'm going down, and as the more that I go deeper and deeper and into certain layers, then a certain door will open. It's like, okay, you've done so much work in this area, now you're ready to go in there. And so I always, for me, I always personally get these weird like jester looking with like the shoes that kind of go.
Oh, why does that feel like it fits you so well? I don't know why, but when you say that, I'm like a part of me is like, of course. It just makes sense.
It's funny because like the whole like clowny or jester thing, I'm like, okay, it makes sense in a way, but I'm like, why? But yeah, I get it too, but it's funny because it's like this, a door will open and I see
Yeah.
them going like doing that, like, go on in. And so it's kind of like you've done the work.
Right.
Here you are, like the next
We can
level.
unlock a new door. Yes. I love
Yeah.
that.
And so I feel that, I mean, in the Akashic Records, each individual soul or energy has masters, teachers, and loved ones. Those are your
Mm.
Akashic guides. And it's a little bit separate from spirit guides, because spirit guides are about this lifetime. So my spirit guides are going to help me as Erin Gallagher in this lifetime
Mm.
to to work with what's going on in my spiritual life. It's not just only that, but the Akashic guides are all of the things you've ever experienced as a soul and how it relates to this lifetime,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how to
It's a
utilize
big
all of
job.
those things. Yeah. And so that's why it may, when I do classes and stuff, sometimes people, a lot of times people get like frustrated because they're not seeing everything all at once. I'm like, it's layers, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes an open mind and an open body. And the more you come in wanting a certain thing or being resistant or being like, I'm not seeing anything. It's like when you say I'm not seeing anything, you're just never going to see anything, because you're just in, story time about what is true for you or not, and so it
Right.
can take some bending of the will sometimes.
Totally. I love that though, because I mean, I think it's just reflective of sort of a deeper spiritual truth that I'm often, attempting to communicate with people and that I've contended with, of course, in my own life, where it's like we may want the answers to certain things, or we may think we're ready to know certain things or see certain things. And we want them to come in a certain way. And, we just have this like egoic idea. And we also might really want to understand things on the level of the mind, and it's like sometimes it's because it's not really time for that yet, and your soul is boss, your soul knows best. It's going to like it's going to unlock things for you as you are able. But sometimes also it's like maybe you're not even ever going to know, and like can you be okay with that?
Yeah, that's a huge thing, because there's a quote I heard where it was like, not everything needs to be healed in this lifetime, you
Yeah,
know?
not everything is meant to be understood by your mind in this
Yeah,
lifetime or ever, really. And that was such a huge thing for me because I think, too, a lot of people who come from, I mean, I believe everyone has trauma. I don't know what your views are on that, but I think
I
if you're
do. Yeah, I
alive,
believe.
okay, I think if you're alive in a human body on planet Earth, you have
Yes.
trauma. Like it's just part of it.
I think people just don't like the word trauma, because it's like people think of trauma as like a car accident, getting beaten,
Or something very severe and
yeah.
physical and everything.
I'm like,
But it,
trauma can be like you went to go grab your Halloween candy and your mom was like, no, what are you thinking? Are you insane? Then you're like, that's trauma, you know?
right, if you aren't able to process and move through that experience and digest it, then it becomes trauma.
It
I
sticks.
think,
Yeah.
if if you are given that, like, you have somebody sits with you and helps you move through the emotions and it moves through your body and you're able to frame it in a way that doesn't cause you distress and there's no more distress in the situation in that moment that it occurred, then that's not actually going to be trauma that you carry forward with you. But otherwise, it will be, right? But I think, oh, what was I going to say? I was going to say, I think a lot of people who have maybe some more severe trauma or it's more compounded or just maybe specific types of trauma. Um, and we have certain patterns where we don't feel safe unless we feel in control. We have very overactive, mental energy, generally speaking, and there's a lot of judgment and there's a lot of need to know and there's a lot of need to control processes. I have sat with that and moved through so many layers of that. Like the control stuff has just been huge for me. And of course it would be, right? Living through what I've lived through. But eventually, like you get to a spot in your spiritual journey and in your development where it's like, fuck, like that's not gonna actually work here,
Yeah.
and it's
And if
actually
you,
hurting me more than it's helping me, and it's just not going to work.
yeah, it
you
just doesn't, the
know
two do not meet, the two do not work together. Yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, and so there's obviously a necessity to create enough safety in the self and in the body and to move through some of that trauma to the point where there is an ability to open up and let go and be like, I don't really need to know. Or if I do need to know, it will come later when it's meant to, and that's okay. I don't have to control this process, just like I don't have to control my life in the ways that I'm used to, right? Easier said than done to kind of get to that spot, but I think it's really important that you mention that because
Yeah, the
this is
control
common.
aspect, God, that's
Hmm.
so huge. I love the way you framed it because it's true. We have this energy of having to control everything because if I don't, A, B, or C will happen. And that's one of the things I really like to say. And I call it like an Akashic mantra, but it's just a mantra in general, which I like to say what my teacher taught me, which is it's no wonder. Like, it's no wonder I feel that way. I went through
Right.
this and that trauma. It's no
Yes,
wonder I experienced
exactly.
that. It's no wonder I'm trying to over intellectualize everything. It's because
Exactly.
A, B, and C. Like, and as soon as I tell people, because people have such a hard time accepting who they are and acknowledging, and I'm like, let's stop for a second because people are wanting so bad to like either understand it or like beating themselves up over it. And I'm like, you are exactly where you're meant to be and you're doing exactly the work you're meant to be. Even if you're taken off course and hijacked and you're running south instead of north for 20 years, 20 lifetimes, it doesn't matter. You're doing everything. It's like it's all happening how it's supposed to be happening. And I know the human
Mm.
self doesn't want to hear that sometimes because it's like, no, it's not.
Yeah,
um
but I wonder if engaging with the Akashic Records in the way that you help people do also can help with some of that. Do you feel
It
so?
does. It does. And that's why I like it because it's such a vast space of not only just like psychic intuitive information, past life, future. Because most people, when you say Akashic Records that have heard of it are like past lives. And I'm
They
like,
think
that's
of
like
past lives, yeah.
not even, yeah, that's like, yeah, that's some of it. But I have found I barely do any past life work in Akashic Records. Like, or if I do,
Mm,
I want to know how it affects this life. Because like, what's the point of
right,
knowing, oh, I did this and this? Yeah, who cares? What does that have to do with now? Right.
right, right, right.
Everybody's different. Some people are just past life readers and stuff. And I think there's good stuff there. But yeah, you can activate dormant gifts that you didn't know were there. You can heal trauma and heal nervous system stuff in there. It's really like the intention you go in with. It's how you
Mm,
feel led and how you follow that. Because you may hear something like 10 people can go into their records and hear the same thing, but then how they react to that and take it out into the world or do the work
hmm.
around it is going to result in 10 different ways or 20 or 30 or 5,000 of how they then move through it or go into the next level, which is
Yeah, absolutely.
amazing and profound and also can be confusing. That's why I tell people, I'm like, I work with mostly high functioning women. And these are women that are like making executive decisions every day and like, and that's why the Akashic Records, for me, I find a space to be able to process all of that high functioning stuff because then we can say, like, it can help us understand why on a body level and also be able to ask our guides and those guides to, because sometimes I'll tell people, just open your records and ask your guides to send you light. It doesn't have to be,
Mm.
I'm in here asking questions and having a team meeting with my guides,
Mm-hmm.
you can utilize them however you want to get whatever you want, or just in meditation, or just in spaces where you want to, let's say, hold an Akashic container. It doesn't have to be, to get information, quote unquote.
Mm. Interesting. So what I'm really curious about is like if people are interested in connecting with their Akashic records, would you recommend that they 100% of the time just go to a reader to start, or is there a way that
Yeah,
they can start to explore on their own?
that's a really great question, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I used to always do videos called demystifying the Akashic records, because there's a lot of people who, I saw a thread once that was like about accessing the Akashic records, and there were people that were like, oh no, you have to, like, your Kundalini has to be activated, and like you have to have, like, go into a container of, someone even said like you have to, like, or I think it was their own experience of having, like, ayahuasca ceremony, but they were basically like, you have to be in like a ceremonial like smoke tent or whatever in order to access the Akashic records. I'm like, you could literally, anyone in the world, anyone can just stop what they're doing and say, I'd like to connect with my guides in the Akashic records. Show me a sign. Like, it doesn't have to be like
Mm,
some big thing. So I always tell the person, based on what you want and how it feels right to you, do that. So you can ask
mm,
your spirit guides or anyone out there, hey, I want to get into Akashic work. Show me a sign or symbol for where I should go. And then you'll just be going through Instagram or Facebook, and then you'll see a thing for Akashic records, and you'll be like, okay, that's where I'm supposed to go. Right. And
mm-hmm.
some people will be like, I'm not there yet. I don't really know how to, like, talk to my guides or anything. So in that case, I would say go to a specific practitioner. So if they were listening
Right.
to this, I'd be like, okay, your guides obviously led you to me because you're listening to this and you want it and you're interested in doing Akashic work. So I would say that. But each practitioner, and we were talking about this a little before, in your own reading experience, being read experience,
Right.
that you get led to the practitioner you're meant to be with. But the thing I like about practitioner versus just kind of going at it alone is that um, it creates a structure around it that is helpful if you're trying to understand. So I would say look at like your level of where you are, and because some people are like, I'm already an open channel. I know how I usually find people and I'm going to do it that way. And some people are really
Right.
like, I'm new and don't know what to do. So you're the first person I've heard of. Can we try it? That's why
Yeah.
I offer the mini reading, because I'm like, I'll just give you a little taste. And then if I'm your person or not, you'll know whether you want to go deeper, right?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I was very much led to a specific person at a specific time, and it felt really resonant. But I've seen like YouTube videos and guided meditations and things like this. And my sense of it and my feeling about it is that it's pretty available if you are open enough and really in alignment with it and you have the desire and everything. But I also think even if you are someone who has a lot of access, like I have a lot of access to different realms and different information and different things that I could pull from about me and my life. And I'm connected to guides and I'm connected to past incarnations, alien incarnations, all these things because I work with the DNA. But there is something about being in a space with someone else and allowing them to guide, and also however they're working with it and it's coming through their channel, giving you a different piece of the puzzle, and someone whose mastery is really in that particular space, like to I just find profound value in that. I would much prefer it that way. I'd rather go to like a master who's gonna really hold that space and guide me in a profound way, and where I can really just relax and release and kind of just
Yeah, and trust
receive.
that that's where they're meant to go. And that's why I love just focusing mostly on Akashic records, because I'm able to see my own path and channels. Like you said, with your DNA work and all the work you do, you can see your realms. And then when I work with somebody else, I see them, I see their guides, I
Totally.
see my guides, I see angelic
Totally.
realms on their side, I see angelic realms on my side. I'm able to see, feel, and manage. And I don't mean manage in a human way, but like spiritually, lovingly manage at the
Yes.
same time while I'm getting the information and still be. And you know this too from doing, like, when I first started doing like spiritual work, it was like I went to this manifestation class and the woman was like, what I do, because she gave us an example for manifesting an apartment in San Francisco, which as we all know is impossible. But she was like, she was
I'm
like,
laughing because I'm like from there. So like I moved out to Oregon
of
from the
course,
Bay
that's the
Area.
example I just happened to
So
use. And
yeah.
that's what we're saying. I'm like, that's the miracle and the mundane I'm talking about. Those things aren't
Right.
that happen, so happen. But
Yes.
she was saying, basically, she was saying, I take a part of myself and I put it on the manifestation. And I'm like working with manifestation and thinking about all the people in San Francisco I know, blah, blah. And then there's another part of me being human and crying and being upset because I'm getting kicked out of my apartment in 30 days and I don't know where the fuck I'm going to go. And like, how do I get there?
Mhm.
So she's like, I compartmentalize in a way where I'm like, okay, this experience of me is going to allow the human experience. And this part of me is going to be manifesting. That's what I'm able to do. And masters in
Right.
Akashic Records and other work are able to do, as you know,
Yeah.
in like, I know how to keep myself here when I'm doing intense, because I do what I call a cosmic cocoon, which is like really intense healing, light language with my hands and light language with language.
Mm.
And I'm doing all this healing. I'm able to have myself suspended over here as I'm doing the healing. And then I'm getting Akashic information here and it's coming out. So it's like, that's why it's so great and valuable to go to someone who really knows what they're doing and has their values down. Like my number one value is integrity, like integrity with everything I do.
Mm.
So 100%, I'm always in integrity. And like you said, when you're in integrity, you know whether to say no to someone. Like, I feel your energy
Right.
is great. It's just not attuned to me at this time. And this is why, or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right. Or there's something else that's in your highest interest. Like someone might feel like they want a particular offer from me. And I'm like, actually, it's this, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily always just a yes or no, but it is that level of attunement. And I think that takes trust. And I think that takes spiritual maturity. And I think that that is leadership. And I think that that makes me feel safe working with someone and really good about working with someone. You know,
Yeah.
when I know
Yeah.
that that's the way that they operate, it's like I
Yeah.
know
And
that
that they're
they're
doing
going
it
to
with
tell
love.
me,
Cause you can tell someone's doing it with
yeah,
love
oh,
when they are.
100%.
They're being
Yes.
real. They're 100% in it. Like, and I have actually had circumstances where someone's guys just said no and no other information. That's
Right.
hard because I'm like, a
Well, what do
part
I tell them? You
I know
know?
I was working with someone and I worked with someone who had saved forever. And she was like, I have the money for the 3-month package. We're like ready. And it was
Oh,
thousands of dollars. And I was like,
yeah.
I keep hearing no. And I said, I'm not hearing no, I'm hearing not yet. There's something and they're not showing me what it is. And I know that's so vague. And it just so happened her son ended up going to rehab and needing to stay with her. Like,
Oh my goodness.
and it was like a
Wow.
month or two later. And she was like, Erin, I'm so glad. I don't know what the guys knew or what happened, but, and I was like, that's why they didn't show me because it had someone else's soul and being involved.
Right.
They were
And it
like,
could have been,
that's not mine. That's not my place. So I
yeah.
just knew no. And trust me, I'm doing this with love. And then she was able to do that. And then we were able to work together. It's just, we had to wait for that to pass. So it's just, yeah, it's just incredible,
I
really. It's
love
amazing.
that. And that's really, I mean, that's integrity to me. Like I just I love that.
I
I
love
love
it too.
that.
It's so ethical and beautiful. And and I think the reason that it's so feels so good to talk about is because there are a lot of people out there not in integrity or doing this work and, and it's good to be kind of on the side of light, when that happens, because it's like, no, we don't operate that way here. We
Well,
operate with
and
your.
yeah, and what a beautiful thing to have that confirmation in this specific instance, you know, because as we know, the more that we follow the guidance, even when it feels uncomfortable, because sometimes a conversation like that, it's like, damn, you know, they could take this any kind of way. You know, it's not what I would like to be true, but it is true.
Yeah.
I know that this is the true thing, and so I'm going to follow that. And then getting the confirmation of how correct that actually was and
Yeah, and
seeing
sometimes
why helps
because,
me
especially
trust
in
it.
Akashic work, sometimes I'll see stuff that doesn't happen for 5 years. And so I will even have to talk to my Akashic
Right.
guides and be like, don't show me shit in 10 years because I can't tell this, I can't tell this person, oh, because I see it as now, because there's no such thing as time, right? I see it as now, but it might not be for 10. And so they're thinking, so that's another thing is the whole timing thing of it. It's like how how to say it. And that's sometimes I will do where I give the person like a PDF ahead of time saying like everything is changeable. You have free will. So everything is changeable and open, because a lot of times people will think like, oh, this we're just humans, so we're absolute thinkers. And if we get into our head that this is the way it is, then
Right.
nothing else is going to come through, because you have made up we are so powerful that if we make up a decision about something, that's the way it is. And so our guides will
Yeah.
step back because they're like, I don't want to, this is,
Well, they're not going to interfere with our free will, I
yeah,
mean, even though, like, obviously we're constantly being led in so many ways towards our highest path, like, we still have free will and we do get to say no to certain things. And then there are certain consequences, and then we get different opportunities, right? Um,
yeah, that's the thing. By saying no, like by doing something that you thought was wrong, you get a different opportunity. It's funny because like I actually had a girl that and this was kind of in the beginning when I thought if somebody hears what I'm saying wrong, it's my fault, as opposed to, oh, they're just not ready or
mm,
whatever it is, or that it's no one's fault, it's just happened, right? But she had this idea of what she wanted to do, and I was like, your guides are just saying no, 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 like you're not supposed. She
mm,
wanted to move back home with her parents. I'm like, you're not supposed to move. That's like actually you're going back to kind of the scene. I kept hearing scene of the crime.
mm.
You're going back to the scene of crime, like don't. And I didn't say scene of the crime because that's could be trauma inducing, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, don't go. I just keep feeling this. And I was trying to find a way to say it in a neutral way. So it wasn't like, don't do that. Cause I also know that as a psychic, like you can say what you see, but you can't tell someone what to do. And then she ended up moving back home, and she like blocked me on social media, and she got really upset. And of course
Mhm.
I thought because it was in the beginning, it's all my fault. Like maybe she should have stayed home. I don't know. Like maybe I was wrong. Well, 3 years later, she came back and was like, you were right. Everything you said happened exactly in the order. Like she said, even you said you saw like trees in a certain way. Like she said, you explained the trees. I saw those exact trees when I went to the forest behind my parents' house. It was like everything you said.
Wow.
So that's just a kind of a message to your listeners too, that like everything you hear, feel, and see is right. Do not
Mm.
gaslight yourself. Do not let other people gaslight you. Everything you see, hear, and feel, even if it's based on something quote unquote wrong or that's only in your own perception, it's correct to you. So really
Mm.
like let yourself acknowledge that, and like the acknowledge that on a deep level, that you know yourself best and trust that, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. And I always, that's such a focus for me in my work, is always directing people back to themselves and to their own channel of knowing and to their own information. And for me personally too, I have an insanely high regard for free will and sovereignty. And I am not, it's interesting too, because I also just got a human design reading, my first like actual professional reading. And, it's all over my chart too. I'm not like someone who's really designed to tell people what to do or to fix things, or like it's just not like my partner, who is a projector and has the guilt motivation in human design, which is not really what it sounds like. It's more like
Yeah,
he's
I
a
know.
prop.
Yeah,
He's
it
a,
totally sounds wrong. I'm like, don't use that word because we have a
I know, but the creator of human design, like, just selected some interesting words for
well, I
specific
think
things.
they do those words in order to really make you like to hit you. It's like that word makes you feel
Yeah,
something. Like my
it
not self
definitely
name is
does.
frustration. So when I hear frustration, I'm like, that is so real, because that is, even though it's a
Yeah,
human feeling, I'm like, that's whenever I'm in resistance to something, it's always frustration, So I'm like, that's true.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But the
So
guilt motivation, I feel like, also doesn't necessarily encompass what it actually is, because
yeah.
it's really about he's designed to like tell people what to do and to fix problems for
Yep.
them, like to be like, no, that's the wrong direction, go over here. And like he gets really like invested in that. I am not like that. Like, and I will share my perspective and opinion when asked, but I always am going to be like, okay, like if you want to do that though, like that's fine. And like ultimately it's your life, and like you need to trust yourself, and you're actually the authority on your life, not me. And
Yeah.
whenever anyone is trying to give me that responsibility, or like, you have this power to make this decision for my life, and you're the one that's going to tell, and even when I give information, I'm like, even with all of this information, like, you're in charge. You can, listen to it or not. You can agree with it or not. Like, I'm not the be all end all. Like, you get to choose. And, I'm going to love you through the whole thing, but I'm not here to make your choices for you or to disempower you in any way, like
Yeah,
to
and sometimes those
have
things
your
intertwine.
experiences.
Like your neutral thoughts and feelings come up against their neutral thoughts and feelings, or the way they perceive it. And I was telling a friend the other day, I had a situation where a woman came to me and she started asking about children. Will I have children? And now I've realized I don't do those readings anymore. But at the time
Mm,
I was like, I did it. And I just did not see her having kids. And so
mm,
I
that's
said
really hard.
that, and it was another thing where I wished I hadn't, because she was very like logical, rational, not really showing much emotion. Then when I said that, she started freaking out. And I was like, I was not expecting it, because,
Yeah.
and I realized, just don't tell people certain things. But what was the rub was, and what was interesting is that like 2 years later, I saw her on Facebook and she had just had a baby. And so I
Mm,
had all this stuff internally. Was I wrong? Did I see the wrong thing? And then I was shown in the Akashic Records, she was meant to ask you that. You were meant to tell her that, so
right,
that her will would hear that and say, no, I actually want, it would force her will to make a decision about what she wanted.
right.
Then she chose to have the child and had it. So what you saw was quote unquote right at that time, but it was a seed that her Akashic guides planted so that she would hear it and actually have the baby. So it's like this weird,
Totally. Well, now we're getting into a whole conversation about future timelines and potentials
and how you can kind
because
of switch
they
and shift
can
and
be
change.
altered. There's different, sometimes getting a certain piece of information will completely alter a timeline in and of itself. And so these are things I think it's just really important too for people listening to kind of be aware of, even when you're seeking out psychic counsel or when you're working with an Akashic Records reader or something like this, to just know that, sometimes the information that you receive, it could be coming through for a multitude of reasons
Yeah.
and not necessarily because the information is set in stone, you
Yeah,
know?
it's a thing that may move. I just saw like a guitar or a stringed instrument. It's like this piece of information may just pluck a string, and the
Right.
string then makes a vibration, and then the vibration goes out all blah, 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 across all these different lifetimes, whatever, and then it creates a, right, like a action, a thing, like a line of action that will, this will happen, that will happen, this will happen, this,
Yeah.
and then,
Trajectory.
yeah, thank you, trajectory
New
that will happen.
trajectories. Yeah. New trajectories are forming all the time,
Yeah.
and I think specifically with like future work, which I don't actually do a lot of that kind of thing, but um I think that's really, really important for people to understand and keep in mind because, there's also times when it's like, oh my God, but that psychic told me this would happen by this age. And like, they were obviously wrong or they were a charlatan or something. And like maybe, there are people that are just like, they're
Scam
pulling stuff
artists and
out
all
of their
that.
ass or whatever. But, also maybe that was the way that the energy was reading at the time and that
At the
was the most
time.
dominant potential at the time and you changed trajectories. Maybe not even because of that rating, maybe because of that reading, and the information you received, but maybe because of other things. When we're doing shadow work, transformational work, trauma work, activation work, like I see the people who come to me for DNA activation, I see their life path potentials changing like that.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
time they sit down with
One
me,
after another after another. Yep.
yeah, it's a completely different potential set of potentials that I see often. And there are certain things that are almost more or less like set
Yeah.
if it's really a solid like pre-birth like intention and it's like this is the thing that it's just going to happen. But a lot of the time, I mean, a lot of the details they change day by day, moment by moment, and
Yeah. And
so
with
you
all
can't
of the
really
other
attach.
beings out there that are attached and connected. And that's why, like with I always tell, I kind of have a new definition for psychic, which is, because of the work I've done, I am able to see all possible pathways. And then I'm able to see what you will most likely choose based on where you are now.
Right, right,
It
right.
doesn't mean that it's just based on how I know your energy to be because I'm an energy reader. I can tell that you're probably going to do this. And
Right.
then the thing with psychic stuff, that's why I don't want to always say this is absolutely what's going to happen, because then the person, sometimes it's actually cool. Because like, what if you tell, if you're led, like your partner is, to say a very specific thing
Yeah.
that might, like I was saying with my friend with the baby, like that might make them decide based on what that information is to do, to make an actual decision. Maybe it's their guide's way of like, this is how I'll get them to make a decision to do that.
Mm,
Kind of like
that's
bending will in a
interesting.
way.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, totally. I think it's similar for him. He sees a pattern and he sees a strong trajectory. And so it's actually more like it's like, okay, so you're moving in this direction, right? If you keep moving in this direction, there is a cliff at about this GPS location.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you would like to avoid that cliff, like this is the direction to take instead, which is cool. But he gets very passionate and animated about it sometimes too, just because of the way that he's coming from. And I think what it is like, if someone has a very strong sense of self, like for me, I have a deep connection to myself and I trust myself, I trust my path, I have a solid sense of self. So if he says something and then I'm like, I kind of see that, but also like, I'm going to do it my way or whatever, like that's fine. I don't have like an issue and we don't run into problems with that. Or sometimes I'll just be like,
Because yeah, you both have your own
we got our own way
understand.
of
Yeah.
doing
Like,
things. So but generally the things he says I can see already anyway. And then I'm like,
yeah.
God damn it. I know I already knew that. You're
Yeah.
just naming it annoyingly. But it's like I already see it. But I think where it can become problematic is that I think a lot of the time with people that other people maybe they don't I don't even use the term psychic when I talk about myself or my work, but other people do because of what the nature of what tends to come through for me and what I see and what I do and everything. Um, so they're and also I'm a line five. So they like to project onto me that I do have the answers. And then
Yeah,
I'm going to
that's
tell them
another
what to
thing
do,
too. You don't
and I'm
want to
going to
get too
save
much
them.
into your practitioner vibe where it's like, I know everything. I'm the leader here. You got to ask me the question.
Right.
You want to know the answer. It's like, no.
Yeah, well, and it's like this is why part of why I'm so passionate about helping people to really trust themselves and be empowered. Because if there's a codependent sort of a dynamic with a psychic or a mentor or a coach, actually of any kind, and it's like this person has the answers for me because they have a connection to something that I don't. And so I'm just going to take all of this responsibility for my choices and my life that I don't want to hold or I don't know how to hold, and I'm going to give it to them. Or I'm going to give them the responsibility of reflecting me back to me because I don't know who that is. And then I'm going to take on whatever they say as truth. That is a recipe for a lot of fucking resentment down the line,
Yes,
actually.
it is. And self-resentment too. Like, why did I do that? Or why did
Totally.
I feel like I couldn't trust myself? And a lot of like, it is, what's the word? Like making, showing evidence of the thing. It's like, of not trusting myself or whatever. And then when you keep believing that more and more, then you trust yourself less. It's just like,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
beating
And
itself.
then still like even with that, sometimes having those kinds of experiences where we outsource everything in this really intense way and um you know it ends up in a tangle. Sometimes that's part of the path too. And sometimes
Yeah,
that's how
and
we
it
learn the
happens to me
lesson.
a lot too. It's like, how do we as practitioners or healers know when to actually go to someone else? Because it will drive me nuts when I'm
Mm.
like, because sometimes I just want to do a victim post on Facebook like everyone else and be like, this sucks and I hate this and blah, blah, and not have someone be like, you are the healer. You heal you know what? That's bullshit. Like we're living
Yeah.
in a world where we have, interdependence with other people. I need another person to support me, hold space for me, do a chiropractor
Mm.
adjustment, like help me with mindset stuff. Because I do understand that, yes, I am the source and yes, I get to heal myself. But I also want other human beings to help me, support me, hold space for me, call me out if they want to, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's like it's kind of freaking ridiculous that we would expect to not need that or that that wouldn't be a part of it because we are here 8 billion of us on the planet. Why? if we're supposed to do everything alone or have all the answers on our own, like why would there be 8 billion people? There would just be one, and it
Yeah,
would be
I know
you.
it all. Now what?
You would just be alone. And I think it's just this is a space where I've navigated a lot and extremes in different directions, and I've really dove into this for myself of like the interdependence at the same time as the personal power, because I do think that it's important to have both, and there can be sticky stuff that comes up in either direction. It's a dance, right? But I do really strongly feel that essentially, like, this is how I work with it, is it's like I will probably first try to sit with something and move through it on my own, or with my partner who's my primary like kind of source of support because he's just my best friend and we talk about it or whatever, right? um I'll I'll do whatever it is that I do to try to move through something, and then if it still just doesn't move or doesn't shift, or there's something that it's still not clicking, I'm still not getting it, I'm not, then I know to resource.
Yeah.
It's
And,
really
and
quite simple in that way. And then I resource.
and it's hard too sometimes if you're really in like a dark despair hole or something, right? It's like then you become muddled. Then it's like
Mm,
whenever that happens to me, and I'm a Cancer, so everything is processed through moodiness and feelings and emotions. And I'm like, oh God, because it's just so heavy sometimes.
totally.
And
I'm
that's when
Cancer
I just,
rising.
for the most part, I just, because being the Cancer self, just get comfy, get an ice cream, go lay down in bed, cuddle with my cats, cry my eyes out, whatever it is, like just be in it. Because the more I try to like move through the pain or heal the pain or fix the pain, the more I'm like in resistance to the actual
Mm.
pain. So, and this coming from my addiction background, and I know you get this, like, and it's funny because I look at the clock and it's 3:17, which to me means St. Patrick's Day, which I'm Irish. So like
Oh,
when I was a drinker, it was all about like, the drinking holiday. I just know that
interesting.
that's another connection, but that I want to run, I want to hide, and I will sometimes use the I'm a healer as a way to run and hide too. So even though it's a good thing, we could be
Mm,
using those methods as ways to continue like numbing or not feeling or not sitting in it. And so sometimes when I'm feeling pain, extra, and sometimes I'll know to reach out to people, but other times I will be like, all right, come at me. Like, I am open. I am a channel. I am powerful. I'm sitting here. I'm going to let you tear through me, and not meaning like, oh, I'm going to like self-destruct or in a bad way, but just there is something in this pain. There's something I'm meant to feel.
yeah.
And not, like I said, not to the point where I'm self-harming or anything, but to the point where I'm just like, there's some gift in this somewhere.
Yeah.
And also, like I said, knowing when to like reach out and also be like, come, I need someone to talk to or hang out with. Um,
Totally.
but that's another piece of it, right?
Yeah, I mean I operate really similarly. I'm a big fan of going into whatever emotion and whatever thing is surfacing for me to look at, and getting into just deep relationship with it. And sometimes if we struggle to do that, or if it feels too overwhelming, I think that's a time when we might need space holding, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, wow. Let me think if there's anything else I want to ask you before we wrap up. I could certainly talk to you all day.
I know. I'm like, and this is great. I'm so glad we got together on this because there's so many different ways our work. And this is what's great about working with other people and collaborating. It's like there's so many ways our work touches and connects,
Yes.
and that we either know or don't know. Like we may put this
Yeah.
out into the universe and something comes, whatever. It's just we don't know who's going to hear it or see it, or what activations we're having right now through it. And it's really cool because, like I said, with the undulating kind of energy, Akashic energy around us, it's just kind of like, let's fly, man, let's flow, let's see what comes. Like, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. So actually, how can people get a hold of you? Do you want to say like where they
Yeah,
can find
so
you?
the best way for people to contact me, I'm just a Facebook person. Like I'm always on Facebook. That's like my main place whenever I do
Yeah.
my live videos and stuff. So Facebook's really big. So my Facebook, everything I do is Erin Inspirational. So my name is Erin. My business is Erin Inspirational. A lot of people will say Erin Inspirational, and I'm like, no, it's kind of like one word. It's like the word inspirational, but with an ER at the beginning. So it's
Yeah,
just like one, yeah, it's like a play on words. But
it's cute.
so it's everything's like Erin Inspirational on Instagram, Erin Inspirational on Facebook. And so that's how to find me with that kind of at Erin Inspirational. Also I try to do them quarterly, but I do the Unlock Your Psychic Gifts master classes. Those are free. That's a good way to kind of get into the energy and then see if you want to move forward with working with me. And then my next biggest thing, and this is going to be happening next week, so your listeners probably won't hear this, but the next one I run will probably be in like August or September, is my
Mm.
Activate Your Psychic Gifts. And that's a 6-week program. And that's where
Awesome.
it's pretty cool because it helps people to activate their gifts and any dormant spiritual things that they don't know and kind of activate their soul purpose process. But it's
Mhm.
also a Akashic Records practitioner course. So they will receive certification as an
Mm.
Akashic Records practitioner. So if you either want to do it for
Beautiful.
yourself or do readings for others, make money in an additional like side gig by doing that kind of work and starting out small in that way. Or if you already have a spiritual business, you can add Akashic Records to the list of things you have and start doing readings and making money that way. So, or you can just use it for your own personal growth and wellness. And those are the big things coming up that I do, and also my Facebook group. So Facebook group is called Unlock Your Psychic Gifts. And that's just a
Oh,
community where we all get together, and I have some chats on there and stuff where if anybody's having, I have like a high functioning women chat. So if there's like, oh my God, I'm running a million miles a minute, I got 1,000 things going on, like, and I'm trying to touch into my spirit guys, but it's not working, I need support. We have those kind of like little communities there too.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. Unlock your psychic gifts. Is there anything in closing that it feels like you want to share to the people who are listening? No
Um,
pressure.
no, well, I love this is why I love the Akashic Records too, because this is a message for people watching is like when you start to activate, well, this is what's coming up is, and this is something I wrote down to kind of talk about, which is attunement. When you're working in either Akashic Records or you choose human design or something like that, yes, it's a modality and it's not the be all end all. It doesn't have to be everything you do, but you're choosing a new way that kind of your spiritual body and your spiritual self attunes to a different frequency. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's a cool thing with the Akashic. I, even if you're not interested in Akashic Records specifically, it's a good kind of thing to touch into in order to kind of have attunement in that space, because then it sets off was that trajectory? There's another word for it, but there's like sets off a sequence of events
Mm-hmm.
that happen that can help you along your path and connect you to different amazing practitioners or people because of those activations. So,
Mm.
and another thing that's coming up for me, I don't know who needs to hear this, but I keep hearing trust yourself. So,
Yeah.
because a lot of people that work with me and do this work have issues with self-trust and also reach out to other people to get support, which, like we were talking about, of course, we need support. We're human beings,
Yeah.
interdependence, but um, trust yourself, trust where you are, trust where you're meant to be and where you're going. And know that even if you feel stuck or that you're not in the right place or that you're in stasis or kind of stagnant, there's a reason for it. There's always a reason
Mm.
for it. There's a
Yes.
I talked to a mom the other day she has like I think 4 to 6 kids. She has a lot of kids and she's always momming and she's one of her questions that always comes up is like, I know I have this purpose thing and I'm meant to be doing it and I'm just not right now. What do I do while I'm like waiting? And my question to her was why do you think you're not already doing it?
Mm.
Like this part of your process that you're experiencing right now, even though it may feel like you're not doing it, what if just your energy being, just by being, is doing it? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I know it's hard to hear that because it's a human. We want to be like, yeah, that all sounds good, but I actually want to be like starting a business or doing the thing. And and it's like that's why the trust yourself thing comes up. Trust yourself, trust that if it was meant to happen, something would happen to where it would lead you down that way. It's just not yet, right? It's not ever, it's just not yet.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. It's just it's not not ever. It's just not yet. And I that's been really on my mind and on my heart to share recently too. I actually wrote a post the other day with something, really similar, and I spoke to that in one of my programs this morning to someone The
Yes,
fact
I
that
saw your
there's
post
a
about that and I
reason.
was like, it's so funny. It's just amazing how everything perfectly, like the layers, like
Well, it's in the field too. And, we're in Pisces season. It's like there's a lot of this sort of cosmic womb type of gestation energy and void energy at the same time as there could feel like kind of an urgency to take action in different ways. And it's like there's a lot of change that feels like it's occurring, but for a lot of people, um, the timing hasn't lined up quite yet for certain things, or I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a message that's been in the field to like share with people,
I've been feeling that too. I've been feeling kind of like the pullback and then like you said, and we were talking about that all the different things that happen that aren't us. There's all sorts of other experiences and
Yes.
social things happening and it is like that whole like either sucking back feeling a little bit or like it not yet. Why isn't it not yet? Is I really think, and this is a whole other topic. I don't want to get totally into it, but of like the post-COVID stuff. It's been a number of years
Um,
where we felt like we had each other. Like we're all going through the same thing. We're all going through the same thing. Okay, we got each other like community things were coming in to support us. We were like our everything was kind of like happening all over the world to the same. And then now that we're kind of getting back to our regular lives and now it's like we're starting to split apart again back into our individual things and it's getting back to like real life, whatever that means. That was no such thing. But then now I feel like there's those like it's like post PTSD, it's like post COVID collective
mm,
PTSD where it's all like, and that's a whole other thing, but it has to do with like we're talking about those collective shifts that are
yeah.
also happening as we're having our little individual experiences. It's just a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
And waves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much, Erin.
Thank
I
you. This
really,
has been
really appreciate you
awesome.
joining me today.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
has been
it's
really,
it's
really great.
always a pleasure to connect. So I will have all of Erin's information in the show notes so you can connect with her on her social media and reach out to her and maybe receive an Akashic Records reading from her or check out some of the beautiful programs and offerings that she has. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this episode of Cosmic Conversations. Big gratitude, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.